Hey guys, this is Hanxin Zhao. Since I reported to the public about the serious PhD scandal at TU Delft, I know some persons trying to stop my exposure by expressing my speech, strengthening public opinions with distorted facts, and even putting pressure on me. So far, there's no investigation taking place on this scandal, and no accountability of those bullying, coercion, and fraud activities of the Professor Zofia Lukszo. Then I assume when this battle subsides, there could be some other students or employees suffering the same with what I have suffered. Therefore, to me, no matter if I finally get a PhD diploma or not, I will continue reporting those issues to the public to avoid more people being tortured. And with those evidence, I'm okay to confront TU Delft about this PhD scandal. I hope they can face up with those issues for the interest of all the students and employees. It's time to put things on table, other than anything else. And with this video, I'm going to review the 12 questions that I recently sent to rectors and the executive board of TU Delft regarding this scandal. Also, I will be grateful if you can share my petition and YouTube posts to many of others to prompt the start of an investigation on this issue. First, with 4 top-tier journal papers published, my PhD was terminated for failing to reach the graduation requirement at TU Delft. However, the university refused to show the graduation standards, which is key to the termination. Also, TU Delft granted PhD degrees to the supervisor students who only published 1 low-ranking journal paper. I asked the rector and executive board why there is such a serious double standard, and if TU Delft discriminates me as a Chinese student. Second, TU Delft fabricates stories and distorted facts in the termination letter. I filed an objection to the termination. TU Delft still used fabricated story and distorted facts as basis for their final ruling. I asked the rector and executive board why TU Delft terminated my PhD by fabricating stories and distorting facts. According to doctoral regulation, the final ruling shall be issued by the board for doctorates. I asked the rector and executive board why the final ruling was issued by another department other than the board for doctorates, why the receiver's name on the investigation letter used for supporting the final ruling is not my name. In that case, the final ruling is invalid. I have pointed out those faults and request TU Delft to correct errors and reprocess my objection. I asked the rector and executive board why there's no response from TU Delft. Third, the TPM faculty refused to provide visa extension since December 2023 and forced me to agree with that, although they promised before. I requested only for a 3-month visa extension, as I need to use school facility to finish my work. But the faculty lies that I can still use school facility without the visa extension. They also lied that they would provide access to school facility, but nothing happened. I asked the rector and executive board if the PhD termination had been decided at the moment when the faculty refused to provide visa to me. Why TU Delft indulged the faculty for such serious coercion, fraud, and neglect of duty. Fourth, according to doctoral regulations, the university shall provide my academic transcript once the doctoral education training program is completed. I have finished all doctoral courses. However, TU Delft refused to provide my academic transcript until my PhD was terminated. Finally, TU Delft provided a transcript without course credits presented, and lied that credits are only presented on a PhD diploma other than a transcript. I asked the rector and executive board if that's a serious fraud. If the transcript is a fake one, why TU Delft withholds my academic transcript and course credits? Whether TU Delft on purpose blocks my PhD transfer to other places. Fifth, in February and March 2024, I filed 2 different complaints against the PhD supervisor and the mismanagement as a TPM faculty. Regarding the complaint about the mismanagement as the faculty, according to the regulation, TU Delft regulation for reporting wrongdoings, the executive board shall process the complaint and inform me about the results within 10 weeks. However, there was no response, but the university tried to merge the 2 complaints to be processed under doctoral regulations, to which the 2 complaints do not apply. The purpose is to avoid investigation on the faults of the PhD supervisor and the TPM faculty. I asked the rector and executive board why TU Delft didn't process my complaints according to regulations. why TU Delft chose to protect the faculty management and the supervisor. 6. To terminate my PhD, the supervisor defamed me and fabricated stories in a letter to TU Delft. For example, it reads that I didn't accept the mediation of the school ombudsman. In fact, I accepted the mediation, but the school ombudsman concluded that it's impossible to finish the PhD with the supervisor. I asked the rector and executive board, by knowing this, why TU Delft didn't change supervisors for me, but still indulged the TPM faculty, who still forced me to work with this supervisor, which led to the PhD termination. Why TU Delft still followed the supervisor's request to terminate my PhD, despite knowing those fabrications lies from the supervisor. 7th, in the 4th year, the promoter unreasonably changed my research line of my third paper, which led to the 1 year of PhD program delay. In the 5th year, in the condition that I have beyond graduation standard, she still forced me to agree with additional work by forcing me to claim that's my own plan in the year review form submitted to the university. She also forced me to stop my third paper submission to journals and visa extension, refused to provide access to school facility, despite of knowing that I met difficulties to finish my work without using those school facility. Those are serious abuse of power and neglect of duties. According to Article 8 of doctoral regulations, the supervisor shall be removed. I asked the rector and executive board why TU Delft didn't take any action, even for launching an investigation. 8th, in the 5th year, when I requested to change supervisors, the TPM faculty didn't help. Instead, they informed me that the supervisor would approve my PhD thesis in 2 or 3 weeks, based on which they forced me to hand over my important academic results and full version of PhD thesis in a month. However, after sharing my stuff, the promoter suddenly broke the commitment, but requested TU Delft to terminate my PhD. I asked the rector and the executive board, if that's a group fraud, why TU Delft chose to indulge the faculty and the supervisor for their illegal and even criminal behavior. 9th, after my third paper got published in a top journal in the field, the TPM faculty forced me to agree with a reassessment of my work, saying that that's mandatory. During the assessment, they actually assessed my third published paper other than my PhD thesis, and changed reviewers without informing me and my consent. I ever requested, but the faculty can neither show the school regulations stating that the assessment is mandatory, nor the original copies of the assessment results from the reviewers they put on. In that case, the assessment results are invalid. I ever asked, but the TU Delft refused to answer if the assessment meets the norms and the results are valid. I asked the rector and the executive board if that's a fake assessment, whether the purpose of the assessment is just to find an excuse to terminate my PhD. 10th, in December 2023, after TPM faculty refused to provide me visa extension, the co-supervisor Dr. Linda Kemp forced me to leave the Netherlands in a month by lying that I agree with that, in the condition that I have valid resident permit to stay. She wrote an email in Dutch, in the condition that all other receivers are Dutch but also speak English. But for me, I don't speak Dutch. I reported her behavior to the integrity office of TU Delft. Then she stepped down as a supervisor with the excuse of health problem. I asked the rector and the executive board if her behavior is a serious discrimination and abuse of power. 11th, in 2024, after I was forced to leave the Netherlands by supervisor but still chose to stay, I found I had been stalked and my home had been trespassed. Some stalkers had admitted the stalking facts. I also found a dead rat in my home and also a threatening letter, which I thought was from the supervisor. I'm only a foreign student having less connection with people outside the university. I asked the rector and the executive board if the stalking and trespass have to do with the PhD issue, if the purpose of those criminal activities is to force me to leave the Netherlands and keep silent to the shocking PhD scandal. 12th, I noticed that after this scandal got exposed to some extent in 2025, TU Delft expressed their care about social safety issue to the public by setting up a reporting center in the university. However, after that, TU Delft still fabricates stories and distorted facts in processing my objection to PhD termination. I asked the rector and the executive board if TU Delft really cares about social safety issue, or it was just a show to the public. By treating a foreign student in such a way, and without transparency, justice, and openness, how people can trust TU Delft and expect the university can refrain discriminatory behavior.